welcome to the Planning Commission for Thursday, December 4th, 2014. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So, in the absence of Secretary Hopkins, I will just let the record note that we have a quorum of the Planning Commission, absent Chairperson Fox and Secretary Hopkins. And we also have our Planning Director, Dave Campbell, here this evening. And so, next on the agenda is approval of the meeting agenda.
Move to approve the Hartland Township Planning Commission agenda of December 4th, 2014 as presented.
Second.
Is there any further discussion or changes that we need to make? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the meeting minutes for the regular meeting of November 6th, 2014.
I move to approve the meeting minutes for November 6th, 2014.
Support. Okay, we have a motion and support. Any further discussion on the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Okay, so next item is the meeting minutes for the November 20th meeting.
I move to approve the meeting minutes from November 20th, 2014.
Support.
Okay, motion and support. Any discussion on these set of minutes? Okay, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, call for the public. All good? All right, so we'll call the public. We don't have a public hearing tonight, so item 8A is a comprehensive plan update, single-family residence review, which we have in front of us from our planning director, and I think I'll turn it over to you, Dave, at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Newsom. So as the Planning Commission is well aware, we are in the process of reviewing and updating the future land use plan and our future land use map of the township's comprehensive plan, and particularly the residential component of that future land use plan and that future land use map. And we're doing it in phases. We've scoped out a schedule for the various components of that future land use plan that we want to look at our upcoming meetings, and the schedule for tonight is to look at 3 of our single-family land use designations in the future land use plan and make a determination of whether the description and the narrative that's included in the future land use plan for each of those 3 designations that was developed in 2011 by the Planning Commission is still applicable moving into 2015. And furthermore, does the Planning Commission feel that the amount of land currently designated in the township on the future land use map, is it sufficient to accommodate future residential development of the type described in that particular land use designation? So tonight, the 3 that we're going to look at is the high-density residential land use designation, the medium suburban density residential designation, and the medium urban density residential designation. So what staff has done is provided the Planning Commission with a description of each of those 3 in terms of what they call for in the 2011 future land use plan, the amount of land in the township that's currently designated with each of those 3 designations, and a kind of a build-out analysis of, from the planning department's staff's perspective, is there enough developable land in the township to accommodate the development for that particular designation based in large part on the residential housing market analysis that the township had done by Zimmerman Volk Associates, which we received back in August. We're taking their findings of what the current market demand is in Hartland Township for these various housing types, and the end game is to ensure that if the market demands these types of housing, does our future land use plan accommodate them, so that our comprehensive plan, our future land use map, is designed to accommodate the housing that our market will be demanding over the next 5 years based on that Zimmerman Volk analysis. So the high-density residential land use designation is a very specific one, and it's specific for manufactured housing parks, of which Hartland Township has one, and along the south side of M59, the Hartland Meadows development. So this area here, south side of M59, close to the eastern boundary of Hartland Township. 160 acres, which comprises less than 1% of the township. The Zimmerman Volk analysis did not address a need for additional manufactured housing in a manufactured housing park type development. And it is the determination of staff that that particular development is sufficient to accommodate the type of housing called for in the high-density residential designation. It is not the recommendation of staff that any additional land within Hartland Township receive that designation on any updated future land use map. I will pause there to see if there's any questions or comments from the Planning Commission of staff's analysis of that.
I agree. I think we're fine.
Yeah, I was just curious, is that mobile home park full? Do we even know?
I
was just curious.
I don't know that we...
Not? Okay,
Yeah,
so it's fine, too.
I'm glad that we agree, Commissioner Mitchell. We did not do an analysis specifically for this purpose, but I know that in past conversations that I've had, it's my understanding that there's still some available plots over there,
Okay, I was just curious.
that they're not at capacity. The second residential designation that staff analyzed was the medium suburban density residential designation. So most of the land currently designated medium suburban density is this, I guess, tan color, mostly along the M59 corridor. So this is our San Marino development, Hartland Estates, Meadowview Estates down here south of Bergen, and so on. So what this designation envisions is lot sizes of 1 to 2 dwellings per acre, or half acre to 1 acre lot sizes. Currently, there's about 2,400 acres of the township that have this land use designation, which is about 11% of the township. The Zimmerman Volk analysis housing type that would most likely fit in the medium suburban density residential designation is what they consider their village houses to their mid-range neighborhood residences. And what their analysis finds is that the township could accommodate to, the market could absorb about 150 to 180 of these units over the next 5 years. So when staff looked at the developable land in the township that currently has that designation, it was our determination that there is sufficient land currently with that designation to accommodate those possibly 150 to 180 acres. In particular, if you look at the developable area north and west of the where the River Church construction is going on, along the east side of the Heritage Meadows development, on the west side of Old 23. So this is all potentially developable land. This is the old Tamarack campsite. There is sewer available along this portion of Bergen Road, which would accommodate some medium density development. And then also the Hartland Glen Golf Course, which, as many of you are aware, there was a development planned for a golf course community there years ago. That hasn't come to fruition yet, but there is the potential there for a large-scale development. There is the sewer capacity there for that. So staff believes that there is adequate land to accommodate the type of development that would fit well into that particular land use designation, with some possible further discussion of the area that the Zimmerman-Volk analysis called out, which is some of this developable property on the north side of Dunham Road, just east of the middle school, high school campus. That could be a possibility for either the medium-density suburban residential designation or the urban density residential designation that we're going to talk about here in a minute. So as we talked about very early on in this process, way back in May, that those properties on the north side of Dunham Road were a possibility for a redesignation on on our new future land use map, and this medium suburban density residential would be one possibility, or the one I'm about to get to, which is the medium urban density residential designation, which you'll hear me say we don't have any of that's developable right now. So that's the analysis of staff, and again, I'll pause to see if there's any discussion on that particular land use designation.
Anybody? No. I've just got a question.
Sure.
There's no sewer or water up to there, is there?
So there's water going into the school campus,
Yeah.
and then there's sewer going all the way up the US 23 corridor.
Okay.
The water system going into the sewer, into the school is a private system, but you know the pipes are in the ground, at least along Hartland, that portion of Hartland Road. So you know, obviously there's some infrastructure that would need to be extended along Dunham Road to accommodate anything of any kind of medium to higher density, but it's at least in the neighborhood.
Right, it's close. Okay.
So is this the time, if we were interested in increasing that, or moving that area into a medium suburban, would now be the time that we should probably talk about it?
Yeah, tonight or
percent of the township to a medium.
So I think tonight would be the night where we would at least reach something of a consensus of, yes, that is a designation that we agree there should be more of. And we can start talking about where it could be. It's not necessary tonight to say, here's where it shall be. But it's a good time as any to talk about some thoughts, some ideas.
All right, well, Zimmerman and Volk's study indicated that we have the capacity to fill that in the future, then we probably want to increase it to at least close to their recommendation for percentage-wise.
So right now it's designated as the low suburban, and which is 1 to 2 acre lots. The medium suburban density is closer to half-acre to 1 acre lots, and then, as we'll talk about here in a minute, the urban density gets up into 2 to 3 units per acre. And yes, the Zimmerman-Volk study did call that area out specifically as a potential for some of the village-style homes.
Well, I know that we're not really concerned tonight about what area, but if that area was included, I think first we need to decide whether we have a consensus on the need for it. And then in that area, I know it's low density now, I think a medium suburban is probably more appropriate because there is water and sewer pretty reachable from there. So that might be an area that we would want to consider to convert that. But tonight I'm in favor of saying we probably need to increase the demand for medium suburban.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with those comments. And that's a prime candidate, I would say, as well.
Dave, what are the lot sizes for the medium suburban?
It'd be 1/2 to 1 acre is what would be envisioned. I mean, the zoning designation that most closely matches that is the suburban residential zoning district, which is what, for example, San Marino is. San Marino is 3/4 to 1 acre lots mostly.
The one right down the road here, that's the medium suburban,
Heritage Meadows?
right across the street.
Yep, so we're going to talk about that one. That was actually the next one. That's the medium urban,
Okay.
so a little higher density there.
And what are the sizes for the medium urban?
That's 2 to 3 houses per acre.
2 to 3 per.
Yes. 2 to 3.
And Dave, when you started out the talk about this, you mentioned all the different areas currently that are zoned kind of this medium suburban, and you said like here, like the old Camp Tamarack site, and, these places that still can be developed further.
Yes?
And I don't know, like, knowing these places that are open, how many units that could fill up with. If we have this need for Zimmerman vote to do 120 or 150, with the land we have designated now that hasn't been used up yet, are we even close to filling up the 120 and to 150, do we know? And that's why we might have a need for more?
So what staff's built on analysis, and granted it's a quick and dirty analysis, for lack of a better analogy than that, there is enough land currently designated medium suburban density residential to more than accommodate those 150 to 180 units over the next 5 years. If properties such as the Tamarack site and some of the others were to build out to their maximum capacity. And so that's our recommendation, that there is enough. With the caveat that the Volk study specifically called out this area. And if this area were to go to what they're recommending, which is their village I'm trying to remember what they call it, their village and low-range single-family homes, that could be a prime candidate for those types of homes, keeping in mind, though, that those types of homes could just as easily fall into the medium urban density, which is what we're going to get to in a minute.
And then up north at the Clyde intersection of the freeway, how we've got kind of the planned industrial, and then next to it to the southeast, we've got, I think, like apartment.
Yeah, multiple family.
So is another place maybe that potentially would kind of step down in intensity. I don't know about the infrastructure there either for if there's water, sewer for the industrial and then for the apartments. Is there any sense to that, to kind of step it down versus just kind of end with apartments right next to whatever that next land designation is?
So, the multifamily designation, we're going to talk about in 2 weeks.
Okay. Just trying to understand it.
Yeah, the multiple family residential. That's going to be on the docket for December 18th. The idea here is that if this area at the interchange builds out in the planned industrial research and development realm, and you have some sort of an office park or an R&D park or a medical campus, whatever it is, then the thought is that this multifamily just in close proximity to it would be where, the employment base could potentially, have a live-work scenario. Is the infrastructure there? The sewer is certainly there. The water is still a ways away. The water doesn't extend beyond the schools area.
Okay.
Now, the Water Master Plan, which is a long-range plan, does show the water looping all the way across Clyde Road, but that's probably a ways off still.
Well, but if you had an industrial research development...
We'd have that.
You probably would.
They probably have their own water tower.
They may do that, or they, just like a meeting we had today that I'm going to tell you about, they may foot the bill to bring the water up there if they need it bad enough. And then as different developments along the way hook up, then there would be some sort of a reimbursement mechanism.
Okay.
Is there an answer in there?
Yeah, there is. I was just, again, trying to see another pulse up there, and I was just trying to understand how we were foreseeing how that would build out if that happened.
One of the things we talked about was a couple of these properties just on the north side of Clyde, just east of this area.
Sure.
Could also be a potential, it could also have the potential for multifamily on the north side of Clyde as well. And we'll talk about that when we get to the multifamily discussion.
Yeah, and keep in mind, we're not prohibiting any kind of these developments, right? This is just a master plan kind of thing. So if anybody did come to the table with that, you could definitely take a look at it.
So, can we say, at least for this evening, that, and maybe we'll be able to say this with more certainty once we get to the medium urban density, but what I'm hearing is that there is some openness to taking a close look at the north side of Dunham, east of the high school, And that's a strong candidate for redesignation when we get to that point. Okay?
Great.
So then the third future land use category that we're going to talk about tonight is the medium urban density. So on our map, it's the this orange with the black dots. And there's 3 specific areas of that designation in the township right now, and all 3 of them are built out. One is the Heritage Meadows development right down the road here. The other is in here through the Tri-Lakes area, which is pretty well built out with all the old cottage plats from way back when. And then the third one is the combination of the Mill Point and the Cobblestone Preserve development. So the Zimmerman-Volk study recommends, as we just talked about, that the market could absorb 150 to 180 of these, low to medium range kind of starter homes on half-acre or smaller lots. And this is probably the prime land use designation to accommodate that type of development. And again, we don't have any, the Hartland Township does not have any of it left. So if the idea of going through this whole process of updating the future land use the future land use map is accommodating the housing that Hartland Township is in the market for, then this is probably the most prime candidate of all our land use designations for adding more of it. And that's essentially what our analysis says. We need more of this land use designation. This is what the market is demanding. This is what we don't have enough of. And so I guess I'd be interested to see if the Planning Commission agrees with that assessment.
I certainly do.
And so if we agree to that, then we will, in the very near future, start talking about where that could be. And I would think that the Dunham Road properties are, again, a very viable candidate for that. When we go back to that pink properties map that we saw back in May of large developable land that could be redesignated, I know in through here, the Bergen Old 23 corridor, these properties, and particularly these properties right here at the corner of Bergen and Old 23, that are currently designated planned industrial. I think we'll be having some conversations here shortly of, are those, some combination of those, a viable candidate for A, going to residential, and B, going to this urban density residential designation. Any questions or comments?
A question, Dave, up off Dunham Road where we were concentrating on a moment ago. So if we say that that's a candidate for the medium urban density, which is 2 to 3 per acre, does that mean then that we wouldn't consider it for the medium suburban density, or we could do a mixture there?
You could. That really needs to be something we want to talk about, though. Now, keep in mind that, and maybe this is getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, how much of this is developable is questionable. I think this whole area here, when we had our joint meeting with the Township Board, Matt Germain pointed out to us, and he's right, that there's a reason Clark Road doesn't extend through here, and that's because this is pretty swampy in through here. That doesn't mean that it can't be designated a better future land use designation. Could there be a mix? Sure, there could be a transition perhaps of more of the urban as you get closer to the village area and to the schools, and then perhaps transitioning to the more of the suburban density as you go further east along Dunham Road.
I'm just thinking of what the property looks like there, and I think it's largely wooded. Like that's off to the east of the creek.
It is, and then the bullocks, the game preserve is up there.
Variety farm, yeah.
Yep.
I'm just like, it's in the back of my mind that maybe some of those areas, that property would be suited for something like that, maybe with a little bit larger parcels and maybe homes to go with it. And then maybe coming east, we could, I guess I'm just curious, so we're not going to say that we can't do, medium suburban density in those areas, or are we kind of saying that?
So if, let's say that in the next couple months, the Planning Commission designates some of these properties as a medium suburban density, and then a year later, a developer comes in who wants to do something of a higher density, and in so doing, they want to rezone it to a different zoning classification or maybe do a planned development. The first thing that we, as the township's planners do, is refer back to our future land use plan and see if what's being proposed, the rezoning and the development behind it, is it consistent with our future land use plan? So, are you absolutely committing to this is what shall be built on this property? It's your vision for the township, and you want to hold to that vision. So it is something of a commitment.
One way,
It's important decisions.
I'm just thinking what we have in Cobblestone. Right, and Cobblestone would be the medium urban, is that correct?
Yes.
And then just adjacent to it is San Marino, not far away.
no, that's,
This is Hartland Woods and Rolling Hills and through
Oh,
there?
it is?
Yes.
Okay, all right, I don't know it all that well, okay.
Mill Points would be kind of,
Just north.
Just north of there,
Right.
coming off of 59.
They're always cutting through each other's neighborhood.
I think I'm guilty of that.
well, one way around that, Tom, I mean, you could designate it as planned development, and then developer based on the land. I know there's sand over there, so I know that because Bullock used to mine it, so I know some of that area is sand. But I have a question about the planned development. What was Zimmerman and Volk's? I mean, I know they said we didn't have enough medium density, but medium urban, but we have planned development. I know Larry Hopkins and Larry Fox talked about the areas of planned development. Maybe we have enough of that that we wouldn't have to designate another area in the township as medium urban.
So, planned development leaves you open for a lot of options. But
Well, how do they? What if they? I mean, how would if we had more planned development area? Let's say that when Zimmerman and Volk came in here and that area was designated as planned development, would they consider that as part of this solution, or would they still recommend the fact that we don't have enough designated area as?
What they said is our market demands 150, 180 of these starter homes, right, over the next 5 years.
They don't care how we get there.
Sort of,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, but they did make a point to call out 3 specific areas of Hartland Township should take a close look at these areas. This is one. We do have a land use designation of special planning area, but it's pretty specific to this development right here at Fenton and Pleasant Valley. You may want to be careful of kind of using that planned development designation as kind of a blanket anything goes designation. You want to be careful with how many other places you may designate with that. And maybe, Mr. Murphy, to get back to your point, redesignated to a future land use designation is the vision of the township, but when the day comes where someone's actually requesting rezoning, requesting a planned development, the future land use plan should be your first consideration, not necessarily your only consideration. But if you read the planned development standards of our zoning ordinance, one of the first things it says is, what does your comprehensive plan say should be on this property?
So, yeah, just understand, I'm for sure, I agree that it's the area for the medium urban density. But I'm just questioning on if someone decided that maybe we should put some medium urban residential. But in case it was a time that someone wanted to go with the medium urban residential, that could still be considered there.
It could still be considered. Part of that consideration for you as a planning commission and our township board is, are we deviating too much from our future land use plan?
And again, I think the main focus tonight should be to recognize the the needs, because we have other zoning, there are other parcels to go through here. One which, Dave, you highlighted already is that section at Bergen in 23, which is currently zoned as industrial research and development. You know, there might be a different vision in that corner, which now allows for some different thought for some of the suburban residential, et cetera. So, I mean, so I think if we just identify the needs at this point, and then when we get through all of that, now I'll take a look at
True.
What do we have?
Yep.
Versus what do we need?
Yeah, again, I'm not asking the Planning Commission to redesignate any properties here this evening. I am asking for some buy-in of, do we need more of this as opposed to more of that? I feel like that's what I'm getting. It doesn't hurt to at least start having these conversations of, okay, where might we put it? But I would agree we don't need to necessarily get too far into it this evening. Okay. Any other discussion? That's what I had to say this evening about those three future land use designations. We can leave it up to our very capable vice chair to decide if we're moving on or not.
Yeah, I think it was a good discussion. I think we have consensus from us that staff conclusion was pretty close to what we need. So I guess then we will move on to the next item, which is the same kind of a review of the different, with the developmental policy.
Yes. So back in November, we talked about the existing development policies in our 2011 Future Land Use Plan update, which look like these. And we came to the Planning Commission and said, is this the same residential development policy and the same settlement area development policy that should be in the 2015 update? The Planning Commission had some recommendations for some changes. Staff incorporated those recommendations and also did some further editing, resulting in, when we did the red line presentation of them, looks like there's a lot of red ink on the page. We brought back the revised policies to the Planning Commission at the last meeting on November 20th, and what the Planning Commission said is, we'd like to see where all these changes are. So now we're representing them to you, but in the red line version, so you can see where those changes are, and then we've also presented clean versions. I will fully acknowledge that it looks like there's a lot of changes. What I would advocate, or hope that you would agree with, is that the changes are meant to enhance the language, make the language easier to read, better represent what it is we're trying to say, without necessarily changing the intent of what we're trying to say. So we presented the two policies, the residential policy and the settlement area policies, both in the red line versions and then the clean versions, to see if the Planning Commission wants to consider these the updated policies to go in the 2015 plan. Now, to add another layer to that, Commissioner Grissom got with us earlier this week and said she had some thoughts, some ideas, some questions. So what is sitting before all of you tonight is then kind of another version of these in red line and blue line, but these are incorporating Sue's comments, questions, ideas. So I suppose we could start with what staff has for you and see what the thoughts are there, and then I might turn it over to Sue to speak specifically to what her ideas were. Or you could just say you love them and just say, let's go with them.
Well, there's some typos.
Yeah, there was some typos.
I noticed at least
some
a couple.
grammar, and then there's some ideas. Some were just typos and grammar.
So do you want to do wordsmithing tonight?
I would like to get these put to bed, if possible.
So then you would like to do wordsmithing? Okay.
And if we as a staff have over wordsmithed them already, then I'm willing to hear that as well.
Well, I have some ideas as well, so.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe why don't we just take them as you presented them here, and then we can introduce the comments as we get
Okay,
to each one.
sounds good.
Okay.
Go through them step by step.
Okay.
So the residential development policy. So we've got kind of the vision statement, and originally there were 8 design elements, 9. Staff has increased that to 11 of them. Again, I hope that we are not offering a new vision, just maybe perhaps stating the existing vision in a better way.
That's kind of the way I read it. I mean, I didn't see anything here too earth-changing.
Right.
So, but yeah, I did like the presentation much better than it was before, so. Does anybody have any comments on, I guess, the opening statements that we have, the first 2 paragraphs?
Yes.
That would be a good time.
Okay.
Well, just a note, David, in the correction, maybe you've already recognized it, but it still says 2011 comprehensive plan, never carried over to 2015 as your letter.
Okay, that's just a mistake.
Yeah, both of those are the plans. But in the second paragraph now, I'm back on the residential development policies.
Yes.
Second paragraph, the very first line, it says the following residential development policies should followed. Shouldn't there be a word in there? Like
You should
should
say a
be
different
followed?
copy than I have.
I think he's looking at the clean version.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clean
Not the marked
version.
up.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, well, some of the markups were there, but in the clean version, it didn't get carried over. So I went off of the clean version.
Okay. My intent was not to make this more confusing than...
It's
the
not,
red line says, my red line.
Yeah, so what we're seeing is there's some inconsistency between the red line and the clean version.
Yeah, the red line was
And that
correct,
should,
but it didn't.
I blame Microsoft Word for that, because it should just be you accept changes and it just happens.
That's right.
Anyway, okay, so should be, yes.
And
So that
then,
it,
and then as it goes on to the second sentence there, so it now should read, should be followed when evaluating future residential proposals, and then I think that should be a semicolon, eliminate the word "to," because now you're stating like 3 facts. Ensures that such new development is compatible with the existing character of the township, provides housing opportunities for all lifestyles, and offers the amenities.
yeah, almost kind of bullet point those
Right.
to ensure,
Because the first group kind of runs together with the opening
Yeah.
sentence. So,
okay.
you're right, that's some wordsmithing there.
Where's Larry? He'd be proud of you.
Sentence structure, very important. Does anybody have any problem with the content of either of those 2 paragraphs?
now, I have a question, though. In the very first paragraph, the last line of the first paragraph, it says the variety of housing types, forms, sizes, and costs, etc. I'm not sure I know what the definition of housing types and forms are. And the only reason I bring that point up is because when we get down to bullet 4, it specifically says housing forms. So, what I thought it might, bullet 4 might read better to say housing types, but then I noted up above, well, we make this definition that there's housing types and forms. So I don't know what the difference is. I don't know if it's really beneficial or...
So, let me ask this question. So that last sentence of that top paragraph, a variety of housing types, forms, sizes, and costs, that should almost be repeated in the first sentence of bullet 4. I guess the only sentence of bullet 4. Encourage variety of housing types, forms, sizes, and costs. To create consistency there?
Yeah,
Now,
great.
I think when you're asking what's the difference between types and forms, I mean, I would say the difference in housing types is single family, multifamily, high density, low density, and then forms is, ranches versus, 1-story, 2-story versus colonials versus, so that, everything in Hartland Township is not the same, the same building type, the same floor plan, the same aesthetic.
Well, okay, very good, because that was the way I perceived the definition to be, and hence that's why I brought it up as a question, because if we restate that sentence in bullet 4, then it makes more sense to me.
Okay.
Because all of a sudden we eliminated the types.
Okay.
Okay, very good.
Any other comments on the opening 2 paragraphs here?
Is the blue your stuff, Sue? Is it?
Yep, the blue was my stuff if you're looking on the red and blue version. So like in the first paragraph, at the top, before it was encouraging, and I asked to turn it to encourage in blue.
Yes, ma'am.
It's just, it's just little things there.
Okay, so if we go then to bullet point 1, which starts large landscape buffered areas. Does anybody have comments on that? So I think we're all happy with that one. And the second item?
Bullet 2.
Yeah.
We have
I see we have a...
Just one, I just changed, I looked up in the definition, because everywhere else we had ensure, and it seems like ensure's the right one.
I agree.
So it was just asking to switch it to that.
Makes sense.
Sold.
Number 3.
So number 3, the only reason I commented on that one was it didn't seem like the sentence structure made sense to say starting it that way, so then I think Kim or Dave took that idea and reformatted the way it was sentence structure. Does that sound right?
I agree.
Kind of, because everything was kind of...
And then, are there any further comments on bullet 4?
Yes. So, in some capacity there, we talked about changing that first sentence to include housing types, forms, sizes. But as it goes on, and I don't know how that's going to read in the end, as that sentence finishes up, it says surrounding development patterns and integrate, that should be plural, shouldn't it? Integrates, and I think you should drop the word well and just say integrates within the natural environment.
So I think you would take the words forms, designs, and densities and replace that with types, forms, sizes, and costs.
Yes.
To match the top.
Correct.
And then integrates within the natural environment would finish that sentence.
I think so, yes.
Okay.
Got it.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Bullet 5 there, looks like it's clean. Acceptable. However, are there any comments? Makes sense to me. 6.
I just tried to make it simpler. It was getting kind of like, if you agree, it just was the same point, I think, is that we just want to be able to safely walk to these.
I agree.
It's just getting along. It was a lot of words. If you agree. I don't think we lost anything in the idea.
Nope, I have a problem with that. Does anybody else comments on that, 6? Okay, number 7.
So 7, I brought this up a couple times, and this is a big idea for me. You know, our vision statement for our township is that we're kind of preserve our rural and suburban kind of feel. But then when we get to this statement, it talks about all internal streets and roads shall be paved. So for an example, I would say if we develop Dunham, that's, let's say, still dirt, and then they do a new development, that it sounds like then the new development, all the internal roads would be paved. And I'm just kind of wondering if it's a conflict. Part of our idea is to preserve this rural feel, but we're telling all new developments they all have to be paved, even if they're already off a dirt road.
Yeah.
That's something that I've kind of just always kind of wondered about. Does that really make sense or not?
I think what we would do in a case like that is we would probably have a traffic study done, right? Determine what kind of a new load is going to be put on those roads and whether or not we should require Dunham Road to be paved up to that access point, right? But
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I think all new developments, pretty much, they come in and they pretty much pave them right now.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So, but the
Yeah.
impact study would tell you that, yeah, it needs to be paved, and that a dirt road, you know, would not be able to handle that.
I don't, it's not just the impacts, isn't there an ordinance that certain developments have to be paved to the entrance of the...
Whether it is...
Yeah, the internal streets do, right, the
Yeah.
internal ones do. So that's consistent with our,
Right, so-
ordinance.
But that's what,
I'm just wondering if that makes sense.
Yeah,
We're
she
trying to
got-
preserve our rural feel, you know, and then you've got this country road, wherever it is, and then as soon as they divide the land and make a development, does it really mean that those lots need to be paved, the streets, or does that make sense?
Well,
Can't imagine it any other way, to tell you the truth.
I'm confused by the statement, because what do you mean by all new roads? I mean, Dunham's there,
Right.
and if you build a subdivision
Sure.
off of Dunham and they make it paved, but they don't pave Dunham,
Right.
it's not a new road. So I'm confused by the statement. Plus, I'm afraid if you put that in there, it's going to conflict with the ordinance. Because we already have an ordinance that says when the road needs to be paved. So if you put that in there, I don't know. Well, I don't understand that. I don't think there's enough designation there by just saying all new roads.
This is internal.
So what our adopted comprehensive plan says now is all internal streets as well as access routes should be paved, period. What we're not saying is all internal streets and vehicle access routes should be paved, and then we go on to say, and necessary infrastructure should be designed and installed in a way to maximize the negative visual impact, so on and so on. So this is an example of we're not necessarily changing what we already have in place, we're enhancing upon it. But I think, at the risk of speaking for Sue, I think her question is saying that all roads, internal roads should be paved, is that consistent with our vision of Hartland Township and particularly the preservation of the rural character? We could say something to the effect of all internal streets and vehicle access should be paved where deemed appropriate, perhaps, or we could say something to the effect of particularly where those internal streets take access from a paved road, to maybe speak to your concern that, is it always going to make sense to have a paved road coming off of a gravel road? We could adjust that. Keeping in mind, again, that this isn't necessarily a mandate.
Right, right.
Now, the zoning ordinance is a mandate.
Yeah, it is.
And
I know it is, that's how it is. I was just trying to understand it when...
Yes, this is more of a vision statement. So maybe what Sue's
Yeah.
asking is it truly our vision that
Yeah.
all these roads should always be paved all the time?
Right.
And if it isn't,
Who do you want the discussion to occur with?
Us.
Us.
Me tonight, or
Well,
at each
start, just
particular
as a big
development?
idea, just
Okay.
to start, with, is that our vision, because I'm kind of seeing.
I thought you wanted to include this in the policy. That's
No,
all.
yeah, no, that's just a statement that's
Yeah.
just saying that we should have a discussion on it.
Right,
Okay.
yeah.
So I agree with that discussion, because if we want the character of the country setting, that means gravel roads, generally. But at the same time, if our ordinances say other, and, like, for instance, I live on a gravel road, and Pleasant Valley's gravel,
Sure.
and the road I live on is gravel, but across Pleasant Valley is paved, so you go from gravel to pavement. Well, it does take some of the country setting away, but it's very nice to live on a paved road, which I
yeah.
don't. So I
Right.
like it. So it
Right.
really is a unique question, and maybe with the growth of the area, does that mean that gravel roads go away? I don't know. I think it's worth talking about, for sure.
And I see most developers, as a perk. People like to live off the paved, that they want to live out in the country. So I'm just wondering if we can open it up more as not a mandate, but have it as an option, and the developers most likely will decide they want to pave it, because most people would buy those sites off of the paved. I don't know.
No, they're not going to pave it unless we make them.
Well, okay, then do we need to make them?
I mean, that's
through all
a-
the
The ordinance
other-
already does.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's a right answer. I guess when our statement is we're trying to preserve a rural character. I'm just looking at the big idea.
Well, if that's what you want to try to do, then you're probably not going to allow the size developments that
No,
are
they-
coming in here and forcing them to pave everything. That's the only way around it, because the ordinance is already established.
Well, it's just,
And you can have a larger lot, smaller development, and they don't have to pave it. But if you come in with some of these subdivisions, then it's required already.
and I don't even know where that break point is, Keith.
I don't know the ordinance right off the hand either.
Yeah.
13 homes.
Dave, can you pull up the zoning map again?
Zoning or land use?
Land use map, sorry.
So Dave, what that means is 13 homes on a road means it has to be paved.
Paved at that point.
If you come to Hartland Township and say, I want to do a land division or a subdivision or a site condo or whatever it is, and it's going to have 13 or more homes, then unless you can convince this planning commission and the township board otherwise, the private road that you put in has to be a paved road.
There are provisions for us to determine that it doesn't have to, and we've done that before.
Yes.
So it's not necessarily a mandate, but it's a strong suggestion that it needs to be. And we've had that instance in the past. But to speak generally about the rural character and whether or not, paving or versus gravel takes that away, I think you more maintain rural character by concentrating development where your infrastructure is, right? Because if you look at that map, there's a lot of agricultural use and estate, size lots, and you're not really, that's the rural character, right? And so when you concentrate development along the M59 and 23 arteries, you're maintaining that character by not allowing that sprawl to happen. And it just makes more sense to me that access routes just like this, it makes more sense that we have a statement that says internal streets and vehicular access routes need to be paved. I think it's safer that way. And, but generally speaking, if you're taking away rural character by paving, I don't think you are. I think you take away the rural character when you allow the growth to spread away from your main infrastructure. So I would say it doesn't hurt. I would say the statement here is completely appropriate as it's written.
Now, this is just a vision,
Right.
and it has merit only as a vision. Because I had not read that sentence quite like we've discussed until Keith brought up the point, the vehicular access routes. And I wouldn't necessarily be one to force a developer to pave another section of Dunham to a new development because the pavement ended and it goes to gravel and we now have this new subdivision that all the internal streets are paved, I would say that's not necessarily the developer's responsibility to pave the public highway.
It already has in the policy.
Pardon?
It already is the policy. I mean, well, and let's look at when we talked about changing the,
But not as an ordinance.
yes, it is.
The ordinance states that the subdivision shall be paved. It doesn't say you have to...
There is access roads. What does it say in access roads? But, you know, let's use the Dunham Road for an example. If we decide to change that zoning there to multiple urban or multiple suburban, and you come in there and build all those homes, you're probably going to want that road paved. So if you, well, I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, you got a lot of extra traffic there, you're going to want that road paved.
Well,
And that's- I think that's-
I also want to keep in mind that I don't want to make policies that become so restricted to the developer that he says it's easier to move to the next community and build. I mean, you're talking of a large undertaking to take a section, again, I'm going to use Dunham Road as an example, and bring that road foundation up to county standards and then pave it, plus do all of his infrastructure into a subdivision, etc. So I don't want to discourage developers either.
Right. But if the developer is the one who's overburdening a road that was never designed to accommodate all the traffic that he or she is now adding to it, then it should be the developer's responsibility to improve the road to accommodate the traffic that his development is creating.
We're already encouraging them by allowing more homes per acre than most other areas. So that's his incentive to build there.
But as you do that, he also incurs the cost of the infrastructure to make that development. I mean, there's a crossing point in the two lines that says, you know, I got to build X number of homes to cover the costs of the infrastructures in order for me to invest in this property and make a profit. And now we're going to add another section to that.
Well, we would treat it like any other part of the infrastructure, right? If sewer and water aren't there, but we really need to encourage sewer and water there, the developer's going to have to pay for it. They're going to have to put money in to get that infrastructure out there. And I would say roads fall in the same category. So if the road needs to be improved in order to make that development happen, then it's probably the developer that needs to do it.
The policy statement says vehicle access roads should be paved, so it's not really mandating it anyway. So it's just a suggestion.
But it's a discussion.
You're setting the bar at should be paved.
And that's fine. I just don't want it to
If
say,
the developer wants to do less than that, there are provisions in the zoning ordinance right now that allow that.
Yeah.
But it's that developer convincing you and convincing our township board. And so it's what this position is here's our expectation. If you're going to do less than that, we'll need some convincing as why.
okay, and I can live with that. As long as it doesn't say shall.
So right now, internal streets and vehicular access should be paved.
Should.
Is that for, like you say, for like a development of 13 or more homes? So if somebody did a lot split and they did 4 homes, is this the same thing? Does that matter? I'm just wondering again, thinking about less of a development.
So I think you take a statement like this, all internal streets as well as access routes should be paved. And then based on that vision, you develop private road standards in your zoning ordinance.
Sure.
Private road standards that have been developed in our zoning ordinance say that for anywhere from 3 to 12 homes, you
Okay.
can have gravel.
You can have
Anything
gravel.
more than that,
Okay.
it's paving.
Alrighty.
So these standards,
Okay.
this is your vision, this is your law. These standards were developed
From that,
to meet that vision.
got it. Okay, so then it's specific, okay.
So Dave, now if you have 13
Yeah.
on the road will, or the private drive, we'll call that, will be paved. But how about the artery that gets you to that road?
Doesn't have to be.
Right.
It doesn't, right,
Should be
It
paved.
doesn't have to be.
there you go.
Okay.
13 to 100, 13, you probably would, 150, you might think about making it being paved.
Okay. Thanks.
Good discussion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're clear.
That was a good discussion. All right, Eric, so I think we decided that it's good the way it is. Good the way we talked about. So number 8 here.
Oh,
Not back.
yeah, then if we're leaving that whole, number 7 as is, then my question is, should be paved and necessary infrastructure. I don't think you need a comma after paved. I think you can eliminate it. Should be paved and necessary infrastructure should be designed and installed in a way. I don't think there's a comma there.
I agree.
Okay, on to number 8 then.
So
I like number 8.
I just suggested we eliminate the last within a residential development, because the whole section is about residential development, just to eliminate excess words.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you shouldn't just be preserving within your development, you should be preserving it as best you can outside of your
Everywhere.
development, too.
Sue's point is that the heading is, we're talking only about residential development, so
This whole section.
Try to
agree.
it's redundant. It's redundant.
Yeah, redundant. Thank you.
Okay, number 9. I think we're all, well, is there any comments on number 9 here?
Number 9, I just thought that whole paragraph is a sentence, and I thought it read long. So maybe to others it doesn't, maybe it's fine the way it is. So the only thing I did, or I would suggest, is putting a period at
Each
the word
comma.
requirements, making that a period, and then the word provide, make that start as a new sentence. But that's just some people don't have a problem.
I can see that.
Yeah, I think that's good. Helps you get through it.
Okay, so then moving on to number 10.
So on 10, the way it had before was it kind of talked about providing for the future. And I thought, don't we kind of want to provide connections, now? And if they can't be done now, then you would try to set it up for the future. I wasn't just trying to say just go to the future, you know what I mean? So I thought the word future could come out.
That's a little more broad statement that way.
Yeah.
Especially gated communities, we should add,
Yeah,
That we want more of them?
no, that we should add access to the gated
access through those gated communities.
So I'm not disagreeing with Sue. The idea here is to say, we've all seen examples in Hartland Township and everywhere else where we think, boy, if we could do it over again, we would have made that developer put in an easement so that we could have gotten a road connection over to there. And it was a lost opportunity. So now our vision is to always see those opportunities well ahead of time and get those, establish those opportunities for future connections. Another conversation that sometimes turns into a contentious conversation is make a connection after that development's already been built out, the neighbors have been living there for many years, and now the developer is putting something next door and saying, hey, I want to connect to the end of your cul-de-sac that you've lived at the end of for many years. And that turns into a fight in communities all over the place.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know that whether taking the word future
Helps
out necessarily,
improves on that.
Personally, I kind of like it in there.
Do you like the
It
word?
suggests that
more
it suggests that we're going
arguments
to force those road connections.
Yes, I think so, also.
Well, but taking it out suggests we're going to connect, we're going to force it to an existing one as well, right? So when a new development goes in next to an existing one,
Then that new development is the one that has to provide the easements to whatever's next door to that.
I don't know.
or if there's an easement already there, I think, do we have any cases where there's an easement already there waiting for a connection?
Yes.
We do.
Yes.
So then that would go towards that, if you take the future out,
Okay.
like existing ones as well.
Oh, I see. You're
But
right.
in all cases, are there easements there?
Not all cases.
Not all cases. So, good point.
Yeah.
That I agree with you.
That was Sue's point.
That was Sue's
I think.
point. So I think,
By taking it
Lost.
out.
I'm just waiting to see how it lands.
I think that I can see why we take future out.
Yeah, it doesn't hurt to take it out.
yeah, it doesn't.
Just trying to get in that gated community yet.
Back door. Okay.
I want to run Cullen down to Hacker, that's what I...
All right, number 11. Guess we're all good with the way it is written here, unless there's any comment. Okay. I think we mostly are in favor of the way it's written then.
And then,
Any changes?
okay, and then if we're ready to move on to the settlement area, again, a lot of red ink, but what I would hope is, well, for one thing, that opening paragraph was a paragraph that didn't exist before. We all agreed that should have an opening paragraph. And then from there, it's, in our mind, stating better what is already being stated. And again, I know then we gave you, again, Sue's version with her additional comments.
Okay, so we'll take it the same way then. Opening statement, I see we've got just some corrections to the sentence structure here, but does anybody have any other comments on the statement generally?
I was trying to do the same thing you were doing, Sue. I was just
Okay.
trying to... It reads like a long...
Yeah, okay.
So incorporate Sue's edits to that?
Yeah, I think
The original author must have been an attorney.
yeah, somebody's used to writing zoning ordinances here. Not stories.
Paid by the word.
Yeah. All right, so we'll go to bullet point 1 here.
I stumbled over, in the very first line, I stumbled over the words, "and discourage domination of the village by any single type of use." After I started the sentence with encourage a viable mix, then why do I have to state the opposing side of it? Isn't
'cause you're right.
that enough by just stating encourage a viable mix of complementary retail uses?
What are we trying to discourage? Is there a dominant use that is cropping up down there that...
Not necessarily. Keep in mind, so this is language that already exists in the 2011, so that was a carryover to some degree.
I think,
Wasn't there some discussion because it's almost all residential, they wanted to encourage more commercial?
Right, but then we don't necessarily want the scales to tip too far on the
Right.
commercial side either. We want to keep that mix. So you don't want it to be overly residential or overly office or overly commercial retail. Maybe we want a restaurant down there, but not too many restaurants, that sort of thing. But I could see an argument that using a word like discourage is kind of a negative word in general, and it's maybe redundant because you're already saying you want the
Viable
positive
mix.
word verbiage
Yep.
of enhance a viable mix.
Mix.
So
Yep.
So maybe just add on to that first statement by encouraging a viable mix of complementary retail businesses and residential establishments or residential homes or, yeah, so the first statement, you get both visions incorporated.
I found some redundancies in the first three anyway. I mean, if you look,
Yeah.
the number 3 is almost
Sure.
duplicate of what you said in 1.
Right, and I pointed that one out, and I think Kim tried to kind of, or Dave tried to kind of cut out a little bit of what was in 3, because you're right, it was redundant into 1. I think the new draft is missing a sentence off of 3. I got to bring up one thing, though, that kind of is, again, the overall intent of this section, because it's going to affect, I think, kind of each bullet. So we start out and we talk about, the name of this section is called Settlement Area Development Policies, and it describes Hartland Village, and it also says Partialville Settlement. So they talk about the village and the settlement and merge them and call them settlement area, but pretty much in every one of these bullets below, it only talks about village. And I remember kind of reading about the settlement kind of is treated a little bit different. If I'm not mistaken, like the village might have sidewalks and street trees, where the settlement was kind of, had a different character. So I never see in these bullet points ever kind of going back to the partial settlement. And I think we're going to cover both. We got to kind of look at these bullet points with that respect, if you agree.
Good point.
So are you thinking then, Sue, to maybe change the wording to settlement and village area development? Include the
Maybe
word
we
village?
could, but there's going to be some points in these bullet points that are kind of more village. It's like, because I think we define the village a little differently
Are
than the
the policies
settlement.
of the village the same policies
They're
as
not always.
Parcelville?
They're not always.
And if they're not, then is this really the village area development policies?
Right. Just wanted to bring that up, because it's...
Yeah, in fact, especially when you get to 3,
Yeah.
does the Partialville settlement necessarily want 2-story buildings?
Yeah.
Other than the grist mill, they don't have anything else.
Yeah, I can't remember. I know there's a whole thing about what that should be, and I know it's different than the village. So I don't know if we just change the name of this, like you say, either to just handling the village, and then we have the settlement as a separate deal, or if there's a way we can keep it together, like this starts out trying to do.
Well, doesn't that settlement, Dave, doesn't settlement area tie into something, that a designation in our ordinance?
Yeah, so there's a zoning designation, a zoning district called limited commercial. And the only place you see that in Hartland Township is in the village and a very small portion of the Parcelville settlement. Given this more thought, if you read what's in the adopted plan now, it reads to me like it was intended and written for the village exclusively. So my question would be, is that what this is? Is this really the village area development policy? And if so, we just change the title of it. But then do we want to then have a Parcelville settlement policy, or is that, not to discount the Parcelville area, but is it not necessarily warrant its own development policy? Or does going back to the residential development policy that we just spent a lot of time talking about, is that policy really what covers the Parcelville area as well? Is it really just the village, I guess, the residential component of the village that warrants its own development policy? And I could see an argument that it does. And if so, then we just remove the references in this section, which is from Parcelville, and just make it clear that we're talking about the Hartland Village area.
I've been in favor of removing the Parcelville settlement from this policy. However, you do have a little group of village commercial in Parcherville. Do we need to then take a look at that and see if there's yet a Parcherville settlement page?
Well, okay, keep in mind, though, that what we're doing here is we're trying to only look at, as best we can, the residential component of the future land use plan. It's at a later date, somewhere off in 2016-ish, that I think we're going to take really a wholesale reevaluation of our comprehensive plan. And at that point, we're going to be looking at all the commercial, industrial land use designations, and that would include the limited the village commercial designation like we have in Hartland Village and in Parcelville. The difference here, though, is that that the village is kind of a blend of the two, the retail and the commercial, so it's hard to only look at the residential side of the village without at least taking into account the commercial side of it. There is a very small pocket of the village commercial land use designation up here in Parcelville, but as you can see, it's basically the cider mill.
It's basically the what?
The cider mill, and then everything else around it has the village residential designation.
I didn't think the mill owned that much property on the south side of Parcherville Road.
So there's two colors, and I admit they're kind of hard to see. There's this dark purple and then the lighter.
Yeah, but I'm talking the dark purple.
I see. Okay, I'm going through the
Yeah, okay, yep, you're right. Okay, no, then I agree. That's probably all of the mill's property. So, okay.
Maybe let's think of it this way. We're looking at the settlement area development policy. Let's, at least for this evening, decide if this is the policy that fits the village. And then maybe we as a staff could come up with a better idea of, do we need another policy for Parcherville, and kind of come back to you with that discussion.
Okay,
Yeah, I would agree with that.
that sounds good.
Yep.
So, if that's the agreement, then let's look at these bullet points just in the context of Hartland Village.
Okay.
Okay. So, back to bullet point 1. So we're going to eliminate the discouraging remark there. And maybe add to the retail, business, and residential uses? Or do we just need to say retail and residential? Or do we just say business and residential?
Encourage a viable mix of complementary, I would say complementary retail, residential, and office uses. So I think there's a role there for office.
Yep.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
And then maybe for the next sentence, you could just start it with encourage an active pedestrian environment.
So who crossed off the last, is that your red line on this?
No, so now that is Sue's red line.
Because
Okay.
1 and 3 were kind of,
Right,
like you
that's
had
what
noticed,
that's
and
what
so
I'm
then
asking.
Kim came back, or David did, and they kind of said, okay, you're right. So I think, yeah, because 1 and 3 were pretty much the same. Okay.
So would you guys agree
Yeah.
that there's some redundancy then in the second sentence? Create a retail-oriented mix of businesses that encourage, because we're saying encourage a viable mix already. And so then we just say encourage an active pedestrian environment.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
Encourage an active,
Maybe
And-
keep it simple.
that promotes,
Encourage.
that
Right, take
promotes.
the S off.
Encourage, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so if there's no other comments on that, we can move to the next bullet, number 2. Looks good to me. Great. So if there's no comments, then we'll go on to number 3.
Let's see, 1 and 2 that promote, we shouldn't have promoted, right? 1 and 2-story buildings that promote without the D,
Yeah.
Or S, is it plural, promotes?
that promotes. 1 and 2-story
No,
buildings.
because building is plural, so
Buildings
that
promote.
Yeah, you're right.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Now, I thought if you would like in that bullet to give an example, like you stated in bullet number 1, give an example of a supporting retail on the first floor with offices or residential use on the second floor would be a good place to stick that if you wanted to give an idea or an example of what you're describing.
And so, okay, so really that last sentence in number 1 could be better incorporated in number 3?
Yes.
I think it'd be redundant otherwise.
Okay.
Okay, then moving on to number 4.
So I know Sue wanted to take out striped or separated, and I think staff is okay with that. The idea was that we know there to be at least a few areas of the village where there really is no viable place for a sidewalk, and in those instances, you may have to do something like just
Paint it.
paint it. But perhaps it's not worth
Yeah.
getting into that in your vision statement.
Okay, good.
Okay, moving on to number 5 then. We're good with
Being
that?
safe, yep.
Number 6.
One question I had is, as it reads, promote development that reinforces the consistent use of traditional urban design, and then it says, and architectural design elements. Do we need to restate the word design again? Wouldn't it
could
be
just
better
stop
if
it.
as design and architectural elements?
Or you could just stop it.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that first design
First
could
design
urban
come out.
and architectural. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that would
Okay,
do it
that's
either
good.
way.
Urban and architectural design. Okay. Okay.
Okay, if there's no other comments, we'll move on to number 7 then.
So even though I just said discourage is a bad word, this might be a more appropriate use for it.
I understand what you're stating. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, though.
Encourage uses that avoid objectionable noise. Is that way we're saying encourage? Okay. You weren't kidding when you said wordsmithing. Encourage uses that avoid objectionable noise, odors, glare, so on and so on.
Okay.
Okay,
So I can't build my bakery down there?
that's not...
That's not objectionable.
Right, very
Might
good.
be just so.
Right.
Okay, that looks good.
All right, number 8.
encourage again.
Well, I highly emphasize number 8. I wish we could find some ways to encourage something to happen down there.
Do you want to move that up to number 1?
I want sidewalks, but I also want
Then move it to
I want
1.
lights there.
You also want what?
I want lights downtown,
Christmas lights?
sidewalk lights.
That would be nice. I think that would be nice.
You ought to
Okay.
bite the bullet and put it in.
You gotta fix that drain first.
Capital improvements. Number 9.
Before we came down the road. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Moving on. Number 9. I think we're good with that. If there's comments, then we can move on to number 10. Did we have any, we had some comments regarding this one, whether or not there was really a need to encourage parking behind any buildings. Was there an opportunity on any lots down there for parking behind the building?
Well, let's take, for example, the vacant lot on the southeast corner of Kraus and Avon. Can we picture where that is?
Next to the post office.
Next to the post office. So that's vacant and for sale, so it's not out of the realm of possibility for somebody to come along in the near future. And I think what we would, I mean, I haven't heard anything, but, you know, if they said, hey, I want to put in a little retail building with all the parking in the front, we may say, hey, let's flip that. How about the building goes right on the corner with the parking behind it to keep up that downtown?
Sure. Okay. Makes sense then. Makes perfect sense. Great. Okay, so then we'll move on to number 11. Looks like just a small correction there. Number 12. Looks good. Okay.
So we will make these changes, and we'll bring them back, and you're going to say, yes, these are perfect, we're done with them. No, it's very good discussion and important discussion. And appreciate the amount of scrutiny that you gave it.
Thanks for getting us through it.
Hey, Mike, for doing one of the first meetings, I knew you'd be a good wordsmith. You're all over that.
Okay.
Okay, moving on then, item 8C, the planning calendar. We did have these in front of us previously, and these are incorporating the changes that Mr. Hopkins was requesting.
Yes, as I recall, it was and this is significant because it's next month, it was the January meetings, and then July and August? Was it April? Yep, April, yep, there you go. So the idea is that you're not having Township Board meetings and Planning Commission meetings on the same week. Board is usually the first and third Tuesday, Planning Commission is usually the second and fourth Thursday, but the way the calendar falls, sometimes you wind up with meetings on the same week. We were trying to avoid that, and so I know Clerk Hopkins took a look at this and said this is what he was envisioning. I'd like to, if the Planning Commission is so inclined, have this get approved this evening. If for no other reason, then I know we have some applicants that want to get onto our January agenda, and I'd like to be able to tell them, here is the date that we can target for you.
Fine with me.
Okay. So is there any other
Need a motion?
on these dates, or we're looking for a motion, I think?
Make a motion to approve the 2015 Planning Commission meeting calendar.
Support.
Okay.
Who was it?
What tie?
One.
Oh, I think so.
So we have a motion and support then for the dates that are in front of us here today. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
So we go ahead, we put this on the website, we wait so that when we get these huge audiences for our meetings, everybody knows when they're going to be.
So you can set their DVR.
Right.
Okay. All right, so the next item is call to the public. I don't see any, so we'll move on to the planner's report. Do we have anything, Dave, tonight?
So we talked about, I do have a few things. We talked about meeting with the Hartland schools as part of this update to the future land use plan, just so that the school district and the township are sort of on the same page of what the township is planning for in terms of future residential expansion, because that obviously impacts the schools and their plans for accommodating any increase in enrollment. And then they have to balance that with their school of choice options. So we're having a meeting with representatives from the school next Wednesday, December 10th. And I know that at the very least, Clerk Hopkins and Chair Fox are planning to attend, and the rest of you are more than welcome to be a part of that. We're meeting with, we believe, the superintendent, both deputy superintendents, their facilities manager. So it should be a good group. It should be a good discussion.
What time is it?
At 4 o'clock on December 10th, next Wednesday. And we're meeting at their place. We're meeting in central office. I guess if you are planning to attend, and like I say, you're more than welcome, and that's why I'm talking about it tonight, let me know, just so whatever room they're going to put us in over there, we know we have enough chairs. Chestnut Development, that's the 9-acre parcel next door to Autumn Woods on the south side of M59, the former Detroit Presbytery property. They have submitted a revised conceptual plan development plan, and we are targeting January 15th for that revised concept plan to come back to this planning commission, which, like I said, is why I was hoping to get the calendar approved tonight so that I can get right back to them and tell them, okay, January 25th or January 15th, mark your calendars. That plan is going to show 25 detached condominium units. It's not a site condominium where everyone has their own condominium lot. It's more of a traditional condominium. 25 units where each of the owners own, their walls inward. So have a chance to take a look at that and give them comments on a conceptual level. Speaking of the potential for new residential development, we may be looking at the January 29th meeting as seeing a preliminary condominium plan for if anyone can picture the vacant property on the south side of Maxfield Road, the south side of Maxfield Lake. I'll zoom in on it here. This is a piece of property that's had development proposals on it before, and for reasons mostly related to the economy, those proposals fell through. So we're talking about this area here.
We did look at that one time,
Yep.
and Keith, I can't remember if you were on the commission then, but that stuff's really low, and it's really, really wet back there.
Yes. So they were trying to work around that wetness. They're showing 21 units, minimum half acre.
Is that Lone Tree Road there, Dave?
The south end of it.
Okay.
So Lone Tree Road, or
It would be.
That's
Lone
way
Tree.
wet.
if we can still call it a road, runs right along this line here. Then that's there's a county drain right there too. That's what the blue is.
Levels are going up.
So, the process for a site condominium, when you're not doing it as a planned development, if you're just doing it as a straight zoning condominium, is preliminary condominium plans and then final condominium plans. Both of them have to go to the planning commission and to the township board. So the planning commission would make, on both preliminary and final, would be making a recommendation, and the board would be ultimately approving it. So you'll potentially be seeing that on the 29th. The Michigan Association of Planning is having their annual transportation bonanza, which is just as exciting as it sounds. That's next Thursday during the day in Lansing. Those MAP conferences or presentations are usually pretty good, and Lansing's not that far away. If any of you are interested in attending, we do have a Planning Commission education budget that would pay for something like that. So if anyone's interested, let me know. It's on the 11th from like 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. or something like that in downtown Lansing. Another reminder about the Hartland Family Winterfest on January 31st. That's coming along. Our communications director is kind of spearheading that one with the planning committee of engaged citizens, and they're pulling that all together, and hopefully Mother Nature cooperates, and that turns into a big success that we will then carry on an annual basis, and it will grow and become a great destination for Hartland Township. The new GNC vitamin store is opening over at the Hartland Marketplace next door to Gus's Carryout. There used to be an AT&T store in there before my time. So they're supposed to be opening soon. Their new sign's up, and they're in there stocking the shelves. So I don't know that... I've been looking for them to give us an opening date. I haven't heard yet, but it should be any day. And last thing I have is the Township Board adopted the 2015-2016 strategic plan, which this Planning Commission saw at our last meeting. And there's a number of items on that strategic plan that this Planning Commission will be working with the Planning Department on. So we'll be talking more about that. Some of the key ones perhaps are, I know they want the Planning Commission to look at the architectural standards in the industrial and the light industrial districts and see if those standards are appropriate. And also our site plan review and approvals processes. Are there any opportunities to streamline them or maybe bring some more administrative approvals for some smaller stuff if just staff can approve those rather than full Planning Commission approval? Those are the kind of things that we're going to look at. So just an FYI that plan got adopted. So now the work begins on the things that are on there. And that's what I have.
Okay, moving on, do we have any committee reports tonight? Anything? No. Okay, so look for a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
I support.
We have a motion and support. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.